Chosen one. God is. There is a reason this message may feel different from the others you have heard, because this is not simply about telling you that your pain will disappear. It is about something deeper. What if the pain you have spent so much and time trying to forget has already changed you in ways you have not fully recognized? What if the nights you cried in silence, the rejection you never understood, the relationship that broke your trust, the season when nobody seemed to notice what you were carrying, and the moments when you questioned whether you would ever feel like yourself again were not the end of your story? What if, through all of it, something inside you was being developed? Not because pain itself is good. Pain can be unfair, pain can be confusing, pain can leave real scars. But sometimes, through faith, reflection, and perseverance, a person can emerge from pain carrying something they did not have before: discernment, courage, wisdom, boundaries, compassion, and a strength that does not need to announce itself. That is the deeper meaning behind the title you clicked. God is turning your deepest pain into your greatest divine power, not necessarily by erasing what happened, not by pretending it never mattered, and not by telling you that every painful thing was somehow meant to happen, but by refusing to let what happened have the final word over who you become. Think about that for a moment. There may have been a season when you believed your pain had taken something from you. Perhaps it took your confidence. Perhaps it changed the way you trusted people. Perhaps it made you question your own decisions. Perhaps it forced you to become quiet when you used to be expressive. Perhaps you became more guarded, more observant, more careful. Maybe you started noticing things you once ignored. Maybe you stopped chasing people who never made an effort to stay. Maybe you finally learned that saying no does not make you cruel. Maybe you discovered that being alone is sometimes healthier than being surrounded by people who constantly make you question your worth. And perhaps you did not realize it at the time, but something was changing. The old version of you was being challenged. The person who once tolerated everything was beginning to ask questions. The person who constantly sought approval was beginning to understand self-respect. The person who was terrified of losing people was beginning to realize that losing someone does not mean losing yourself. This is where your pain begins to tell a different story, because there is a difference between being wounded by something and being defined by it. Your pain can explain part of your story without becoming the entire story, and that distinction matters, because some people spend years trying to become the person they were before the pain. But perhaps your next chapter is not about becoming the old you again. Perhaps it is about becoming wiser than the old you, stronger than the old you, more discerning than the old you, more grounded than the old you, and more aware of what truly matters. That is why this message is not asking you to romanticize your suffering. You do not have to call betrayal a blessing. You do not have to call rejection beautiful. You do not have to pretend that heartbreak did not hurt. You do not have to say, "I am grateful they hurt me." You can simply say, "It hurt me, but it will not destroy me." That is where transformation begins, because when you stop asking only, "Why did this happen to me?" you can eventually begin asking, "What can I become because I survived it?" And that question changes everything. Maybe you have been waiting for God to remove every reminder of your past. But perhaps the deeper work is not removing every scar. Perhaps it is teaching you that the scar no longer controls you. A scar is evidence that something happened. It is not evidence that you are still trapped inside that moment. And if you are beginning to recognize that distinction, something important may already be shifting within you. You may notice that certain things no longer affect you the way they once did. The same manipulation that once confused you now becomes obvious. The same rejection that once destroyed your confidence now reminds you that your worth was never determined by someone else's decision. The same loneliness that once frightened you may now give you space to think clearly. The same silence that once felt like abandonment may now become a place where you hear your own thoughts again. That does not mean the pain was necessary. It means you are learning not to waste what you went through. And there is a powerful difference. So before we go deeper, ask yourself something honestly. What is the deepest pain you have carried that you are finally ready to stop allowing to define you? You do not need to share the whole story. If it feels right, simply write one word in the comments that represents what you are ready to leave behind. Not for anyone else, for yourself. Because sometimes naming what you are releasing is the first step toward recognizing what you are becoming. And there is something else you need to understand. Your greatest strength may not come from the moment you finally received what you wanted. It may come from everything you learned while you were waiting, and that brings us to the part of your story most people overlook. The season before the transformation. Because your deepest pain did not only hurt, it taught, and what it taught you may be far more valuable than you realize. Part 2. The Backstory Plus. Why this happened. There is a reason painful seasons can feel so confusing. When you are inside them, you rarely see the lesson. You only see the loss. You see what changed. You see who left. You see the opportunity that disappeared. You see the prayer that seemed unanswered. You see the door that would not open, and you ask, why? Why did I have to experience this? Why did it take so long? Why did I have to learn this lesson through pain? Why did I have to become stronger this way? Those are honest questions. And faith does not require you to pretend you never had them. Sometimes the most sincere prayers are not polished. Sometimes they are simply, God, I do not understand. That sentence can contain more honesty than 100 rehearsed words. Because there are seasons when you cannot see what the future is doing with your past. You only know that something hurts, but time has a way of revealing things that pain hides. Consider what happens when someone has been disappointed repeatedly. At first, they may trust everyone. Then they become suspicious of everyone, but eventually, if they heal properly, something healthier can emerge. Not blind trust, not complete distrust, discernment. That is a different kind of strength. The goal was never to make you incapable of trusting. The goal may be learning whom to trust. The goal was never to make you cold. It may be learning how to remain compassionate without abandoning your boundaries. The goal was never to make you independent to the point of isolation. It may be learning that you can stand on your own feet while still allowing healthy people to stand beside you. This is how pain can become power, not overnight, not magically. Through transformation, your experiences can become information. Your mistakes can become wisdom. Your disappointments can become discernment. Your tears can deepen compassion. Your survival can strengthen courage, and your unanswered questions can eventually produce a deeper relationship with faith. Think about the person you were before your hardest season. What did you tolerate? What did you believe about yourself? What did you believe you needed from other people? What did you fear losing? Maybe you were constantly trying to prove that you were worthy. Worthy of love, worthy of attention, worthy of respect, worthy of being chosen. And perhaps one of the hardest lessons was discovering that you cannot convince someone to value what they have already decided not to value. That realization hurts, but it can also free you, because when your identity stops depending on someone else's approval, you become harder to control. You become less desperate for validation. You become more willing to walk away from what repeatedly diminishes you. You become more willing to wait for what aligns with your values. And suddenly, something that once felt like weakness becomes strength. This is why the title uses the word deepest pain. Not every inconvenience changes you. Some experiences reach deeper. They challenge your identity. They challenge your assumptions. They force you to reconsider what you thought you knew. And sometimes those experiences become turning points. You look back and realize, I would never have chosen that season. But you can also say, that season changed me. Those are not the same as saying the pain was good. It means you acknowledge that something meaningful grew afterward. And perhaps that is where the phrase divine power becomes important. Divine power does not have to mean supernatural abilities. It can mean the strength to remain grounded when circumstances are unstable, the wisdom to recognize what is healthy and what is not, the courage to walk away from what repeatedly violates your peace, the compassion to understand other people's pain without allowing them to abuse yours, the discipline to continue when motivation disappears, the faith to keep moving even when the entire path is not visible. That kind of power is quiet. It does not always look dramatic. Sometimes divine power looks like refusing to return to what broke you. Sometimes it looks like forgiving without reopening the door. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace over proving a point. Sometimes it looks like getting up on a morning when your heart still feels heavy and deciding that yesterday will not determine everything about today. And perhaps you have already done some of these things without realizing their significance. You survived a season you once believed would destroy you.